Ruscism. It's a new form of fascism, now officially. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane on UATV State Channel, bringing hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Many, and especially those proletarian Kremlin-shaped parts of the population of Russia, are just not needing freedom at all. Freedom is quite a hard thing, Being put in easy terms, it is a social responsibility in the first place. That means a nation is quite responsible for the one who governs it. Dictators and tyrants are not coming out of the blue. All of them came directly out of the criminal, social and political inactivity, indifference, disregard and connivance of the society. Society is responsible for that. Secondly, freedom is not peace and quiet. On the contrary, it is almost a constant fight, on different levels and social stratas, but a fight for your rights, a fight for independence, as it is always, and I mean always, your ability to be free will be challenged, and it will be attempted to be taken from you. Freedom is not sofa-sitting, office-walking or peasant living. Stable prices on vodka, meat and bread, it's not freedom, it's a bribery. When the cheapest, the laziest, the most stupid, aggressive and good-for-nothing and largest in quantity in Russia, just by the way, social stratus freedom is bought at a price of food and clothes. Way better than freedom, a Russian society is fit for fascism. Just perfectly fit. Well, since the term fascism has been reserved by Adolf Hitler already, we in Ukraine gave this inhumane ideology of Putin's Russia its own fine term that Timothy Snyder himself called fine, mid-Ruscism, now officially. The term which until today many Ukrainians informally refer to the Russian authorities and which Western scholars attempted to define is now part of Ukrainian law. The Verkhovna Rada adopted a resolution on the use by the political regime of the Russian Federation of the ideology of Ruscism, condemnation of the foundations and practices of Ruscism as totalitarian and misanthropic. The deputies collected in an official document the definitions and characteristics of the current Russian government, which were voiced both in Ukraine and Western historians, publicists and culturologists like Timothy Snyder and Applebaum or Mark Lipovetsky tried to scientifically explain. And they agreed that Ruscism is modern Russian fascism. Why would we need a thing from the press, social networks and scientific works right to legislation of the country to be put? The deputies explain it, and this time I very much agree to that this will allow forming a unified approach for international institutions to the policy of Putin's Russia, which became the basis for unjustified armed aggression against Ukraine. Now I would love to say just one thing that I know no Russian will ever understand, but I'll say it anyway. Russia needs it more than we in Ukraine do. Future, free Russia, if it is ever to emerge from under the rubble of a colossus with clay feet, Putin's Russia, it needs to know what to avoid and how to be different. How not to fall into destructive Ruscism instead of creative patriotism. But that is in long run. In the short-term future, this should help bring Russian leadership to real accountability. The document was in development in the Verkhovna Rada for about 6 months. It was planned to be adopted back in March. However, due to a number of technical circumstances, the voting was postponed to May. As assures the servant of the People political party, there was no political reason behind that, and Ukraine's foreign partners did not put any pressure on Kiev demanding not to adopt the resolution on Ruscism or, on contrary, to adopt it faster. However, before the adoption, a significant change was made to the resolution itself. It has been decided to call Ruscism not the political regime of Russia itself, but the very ideology used by the Kremlin, because it is time to call things what they really are. For example, when you are describing the zero ground left after Russians in Bucha and dead bodies littering the streets, this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly the time and place for a term clusterfuck, not a cluster F word. So for those of you who still arrogantly prefer ostentation to the true nature of things and dare to call it manners, I quote Jack London today. I'll have you know, I do the swearing on this ship. If I need your assistance, I'll call you. I was born and raised in Latvia. So this part is especially interesting for me. Strategy documents prepared by the Russian president's office show Moscow's plans for maintaining influence in Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia. These include funding pro-Russian NGOs' efforts to keep Russian language in school and oppose demolitions of Soviet monuments. It needs to be said, though, that no matter how secret the documents' Putin plans are, no secret to any Latvian, Lithuanian or Estonian it is. Putin always was sponsoring everything pro-Russian as is that. For example, a failed on latest election super pro-Russian party Russian Union of Latvia, led by outdated Soviet queen Tatyana Zhdanok, is a moss-fairy cow that openly moves all that has been stated in these secret documents. Tatyana Zhdanok is a famous person in Latvia, being the one voting against Latvian independence when the country was leaving the Soviet Union. Comrade Zhdanok and a pair of other pro-Kremlin Soviet leftovers have created the party Russian Union of Latvia. And as its Putinized head, she continued to vote against Latvia interests wherever it was possible, fulfilling the Moscow plan. For example, Zhdanok congratulated the people of so-called Donetsk and Luhansk republics while sitting in European Parliament.
Today, 22.022 decisions were made on the status of independent peoples, the independent republics of Donetsk and Lugansk.
And here are some of Zhdanok's colleagues who tend to protect everything that is Russian.
Thinking federals climbing with your dirty paws into the most hidden corners of our Russian soul.
Well, the one thing positive that the Russian Union has lost all that is possible to lose during past elections. What's with those leaked documents? They were prepared by the Directorate for International Relations and Cultural Context, which is directly under the administration of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The plans for each Baltic country consisted of two parts. The first one describes threats to Russian interests, and the second one sets out steps to address them. Political, military, technical and security objectives, trade and economic objectives, and finally, humanitarian social objectives are in turn divided into three time frames: short term until 2022, medium term 2025, and long term up to 2030. However, the focus of the strategy paper for the Baltic states is countering NATO, of course. In 2022, even before the invasion of Ukraine, Russia was concerned with stopping the expansion of US and NATO presence in Baltic states, as well as preventing Baltic countries themselves into NATO's sphere of influence. So, how Russia is doing with that after all?
Well, look, they're working on many fronts of the legislation. We see that they're working, for example, on the appointments in relation to anti-corruption. So a number of appointments are made. It's a big success. And we also see that laws are passed in the parliament. But we need to see that the Venice Commission recommendations are fully met. We need to see that the laws are also enforced, because it's not only adopting laws but also building a track record, be it fighting organized crime, be it fighting corruption, be it the minority issue. So we have to see how does it play out on the ground. We are hopeful that with the dedication that we see from Ukraine, all conditions will be met.
And what about Ukraine, where Russia's aggression, criminal war, tortures, mass killings and all the enormous pain and murderings, and to this day almost $500 billion of destruction to our homeland, where all this Russian war have taken Ukraine to?
The European Parliament has been clear from the very beginning that Ukraine's place is inside the European Union, and everything should be done for Ukraine to win the war. This means that when the declaration and the decision was taken for Ukraine to become a candidate country of the European Union, we welcomed it, we called for it, and we are very much helping Ukraine and taking step by step. Every country has its own path. At the moment, there is a country that has invaded another, and we are with Ukraine in winning this war. Thank you very much.
It very much seems to me that everything that Kremlin was planning to this day against the Baltic states and Ukraine turned in favor of Baltic states and Ukraine. Dear Baltic states, we just need to wait a bit for another leak of documents regarding our Ukrainian counteroffensive, and I'm sure it will be fun reading after we win. Dozens of Russian spies may have worked or are working now in the Nordic countries under the guise of diplomats. That is a fact. And always was. Everyone knew that before 24th February 2022. However, after the date, nobody buys it anymore. The rules of an espionage game have changed forever. Today, the employees of the Foreign Intelligence Service, the GRU or the FSB of Russia, are given some publicity. The names are well known and are reported by the mass media agency ILE. Several Scandinavia's media have also identified dozens of Russian diplomats who may be undercover spies. Agents are often given minor positions in diplomatic missions, while key individuals are still rarely spies. Among identified spies, ILE puts Dmitry Otarochkin, who may be an employee of Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia. First, he worked at the Russian embassy in Helsinki, in Finland, and then was transferred to Denmark to Copenhagen. In the spring of 2022, Otarochkin was forcibly expelled to Russia. The other two likely spies were 60 years old Vladimir Komarov and 37 years old Dmitry Dvinyavinov. According to preliminary data, they are employees of the Russian intelligence. They were expelled in the spring of 2022. The Finnish Protection Police notes that 3 other Russian diplomats may be undercover spies. Local law enforcement officers recorded several times how diplomats turned to the Russians for spying. At the same time, the Swedish broadcaster SVT identified 21 possible diplomatic spies. At least 13 of them worked in Stockholm until April 2022. Norwegian NRK journalists said they had identified 38 Russian intelligence agents operating in the Nordic countries. The Scandinavian countries are only increasing their cooperation with Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Finland today on an unplanned visit. Talks are planned there with his Finnish colleague Sauli Niinistö and Speaker of the Finnish Parliament Petteri Orpo, as well as the participation in the Ukraine Northern Europe Summit for further coordination of military assistance to our state, European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. Separate bilateral meetings are also planned with the Prime Ministers of Denmark, Iceland, Norway and Sweden. On May 13th, Volodymyr Zelensky will visit Germany, writes Bild. On May 14th, he is scheduled to meet the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. And strangely as it is, just a few weeks ago, the German authorities decided to massively expel Russian diplomats from the country in order to reduce the presence of Russian special services in the country.
To reduce the presence of Russian special services in Germany, the federal government has been in contact with the Russian side in recent weeks. As a result, in mid-April, employees of Russian representations in Germany left the country. Statement of the German foreign policy.
The Russian Foreign Ministry said a week ago that Moscow was going to expel more than 20 employees of the German embassy in response to the expulsion of Russian diplomats. There were reports of the expulsion of German diplomats from Russia. It was alleged that they arrived in Berlin from Moscow on a plane that received emergency permission to land in a European airport. A representative of the German Foreign Ministry told Radio Liberty that about 24 employees of Russian diplomatic missions were expelled from the German capital on this very plane. Well, there are no hard thing to explain in easy terms here, dear world. Everything is plain to see. Espionage game confirms the obvious. Russia becomes a worldwide pariah. It will accept its position in time, but now and then we would probably see some Chinese intelligence service officer level up in their ranks. It was Henry Keane on UATV State Channel explaining the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tuned for more.